All right. Hey, everyone. We're going to get started now. So this is essentially a session around introducing who the CNCF Technical Board or Technical Operating Committee, TOC, as we call them, to kind of, so you get to know them in case you have any questions on how projects are accepted in CNCF, which directions things are headed and so on. But for those that are not, familiar, my name is Aniszczyk. I have the fun job of essentially being the person behind the curtain, helping things behind the scenes work well in CNCF, and have been involved since the beginning of the creation of the organization. When we started CNCF, we kind of had different structures, governance structures in place. We have a boring, governing board that kind of handles all the budget stuff, not so exciting. And then the exciting part is the TOC or technical board, who actually handles all the technical vision, direction, which projects get in, which projects get removed, and so on. And so there's 9 people, on this TOC, and we have 3 of them here, potentially 4 if Alexis decides to show up. But we're basically going to kind of try to keep this informal as possible. We'll do some introductions from each of the TOC members, a little bit about their background, kind of what they're working on and what their hopes are for this year. And then I'd just like to kind of maybe ask them a question or two and then just open it up to the crowd here. So we got a small, intimate crowd. So how about we start with Joe from my side.
So hello, everybody. My name's Joe Bita. I'm a principal engineer at VMware. Started a company called Heptio, but before that I was Google and helped get Kubernetes up and running. What I want,
you're new.
Joining the TOC, my take on it is I don't want to do this and just sort of show up for the meetings and not do anything. And so coming into it, the thing that I want to see is that the TOC helps to decide which projects come in, but I think we could do an expanded role to actually make sure that we're serving those projects right and that we're creating a great value proposition for projects so that it's a really great two-way street between the CNCF and the projects to really build some sustainability around that. So that's the stuff I'm excited about.
I'm Liz Rice. I work for Aqua Security, so I guess I have a pretty strong interest in the sort of security side of things. I am currently TOC chair, which is kind of daunting and exciting. Kind of along the same lines of what Joe was saying, I think that the CNCF and the TOC have reached a stage of, we talk quite a lot about maturity models, and we're becoming a more mature organization, and we need to make sure that the kind of the access that projects have to the CNCF, to us, to the services of the CNCF, that it's all really clear how they get the services that can be offered, and that as we grow and scale and complete, if anything is ever complete, the cloud native stack, that we carry on doing that with as much clarity as we can for the projects and for the end users, as well as for the developers.
Thank you. So I'm Jeff Brewer. I'm the chief architect for the small business group at Intuit. They make TurboTax and QuickBooks, and I'm essentially the chief architect for the group that does QuickBooks. I'm actually the end user member on the Technical Oversight Committee, from the representative from the end user community, and that's the thing that I'm also very excited about as true end users of Kubernetes, and talking with a lot of the other end users is really bringing that customer focus into the TOC and into the projects, trying to make sure that we're not doing science projects, that we're not doing a bunch of cool stuff that nobody actually needs to use. And so that's what I'm really trying to keep my eye on. We have about over 80 end user members in the end user committee, or in the end user community, and we look for them to really help us lead the way with the technical direction of the CNCF.
Hello?
Yep.
Is it working? Hi, I'm sorry I'm late. I had it in the calendar for 2 p.m. I don't know why. I'm Alexis. I was the previous chair before Liz took over, thank goodness. I'm the CEO of Weaveworks, one of the Kubernetes companies, along with another 39 others out there on the floor. What am I most excited about this year, I guess? I think this is the year where we developed from being a startup type organization to one that can really scale across the industry. We've got the basics in place to have a new industry platform for cloud native applications consisting of Kubernetes and many other pieces. That's not to say there's a single stack or anything like that. It's just a tool chain that collectively can solve the customer problem of how do I go cloud native. So we need to build that out to a more comprehensive story. And then I think we've set our scope in perpetuity after that. So if we can achieve that this year with the work of the TOC and the new SIGs, the special interest groups, which I'm personally very, very excited about, then I think we're off to the races after that.
Cool. So Alexis, as kind of one of the OG, TOC members.
Season 1.
Yes, exactly. The early days. Can you speak a little bit more about CNCF SIGs? Why did we create them now? A little bit more details, kind of where we are, because they're very brand new and they are really meant to scale.
Yeah, two reasons. Equally important. One was that we wanted to improve the level of diversity and contribution in the whole community of the CNCF. And we felt a bit embarrassed that there were these sort of 9 seats that were precious, which came with the robes and everything else, and everyone else felt kind of out there and somewhat excluded.
Yes.
And that's kind of stupid, a bad way to grow an organization if we're trying to solve industry problems. So now you can get involved and actually be hands-on leading something really important. And the model that we took was essentially the Kubernetes 6, which has worked really, really well. And big round of applause to whoever created that. I know that some of you are in the room. Thank you. I know that joke. So the second reason is that, and this is related, is that we were bottlenecking in the TOC. We had a number of things to do, and we were meeting once a fortnight for an hour, and I think everybody was getting quite depressed with that, and we were not making enough progress. So we had to call a halt and figure out how can we step back and actually scale this across the key activity areas where we want to grow. Security, storage, application delivery / CI/CD, observability, routing and mesh, and so on.
Cool. Anyone else want to add to that, or are we good?
I think it's just a very small addition to what Alexis said. I think it's also about leveraging the expertise that's out there, because we're only 9 people and we can't know everything, and there's a great amount of depth of knowledge out there that I hope the SIGs will enable the TOC to kind of, it's a kind of way of formalizing getting that help and expertise.
Cool. Before I hand it kind of to the audience for any questions, one of the things I would really like to kind of challenge the TOC this year is I think it's always important for organizations to do a bit of spring cleaning, right? You can't just always accept project upon project. Not everything works out. So I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts. We've recently approved a archiving process in CNCF, and how do you think about doing that and potentially what projects you may potentially fall under that, and how's that going to work? Alexis has taken the bait. Alexis has taken the bait. So
you've all seen the Red Wedding episode of Game of Thrones, right?
Everything's archived.
One of the key principles at the beginning of the CNCF is that we wouldn't end up like some other foundations with projects that had died or lost their way, contributors had moved on to other things. So we had a very explicit decision that we could archive a project as well as bring it in. And the archival model, as I understand it, has now been set in, you move into the LF, which means from an intellectual property perspective, things don't change. If somebody subsequently decides to revive the project, they can. It just means that it's not cluttering up the projects that are moving forward.
And leveraging CNCF resources, right? Because we are a full service foundation with tech writers, developer advocates, and so on. So it is a limited set of resources. I think I have some other questions that I'm happy to ask the audience, because it's probably every day I get pinged like, how do I get a project in CNCF? How do I do this? So this is now a opportune time to ask these types of questions, especially if you're interested in, feedback on, potential project directions or have complaints or praises. Now the time is essentially to do it. So anyone have any questions, concerns? Oh, here, I will make this happen because we have to solo mic it. Here you go.
So first of all, follow up. Is that me?
Come up to the front, yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Is this working? Yes, it is. So last year, I asked you a very uncomfortable question about diversity on the committee, and you listened and you did something about it, and thank you. There's more work to do, but you did it, and thank you. And I think that's hugely admirable. So 1 year later, progress. Thank you. My question is more, so I open sourced a project. It is not code. It is an evaluation framework for organizations that want to become cloud native. And essentially it's a self-assessment questionnaire that says, have you thought about this in your org? Have you thought about that in the org? And these are all the things that are blockers for cloud native adoption. But it's not code. It's not code. Is there a world in which the TOC or the CNCF thinks about adopting projects that are not code?
So I think that's a great question, Jace. So first of all, on the diversity thing, initiatives, there is more work to do. There's stuff percolating. It's something that's definitely being actively discussed at the CNCF governing board meeting. And so there's a bunch of hazy plans that we're working on making more concrete there. Yeah. So yeah, because we're not. I don't think anybody's happy with where we're at here. With respect to sort of non-code projects, I think there's a lot in common with what you're talking about there. Plus the idea of like, do we have projects that are solely a specification? I think there's shared things where it's like these things are there's interesting thinking. There's people coming together. There may be versions of it, but it's not actual code. There's an artifact, and I think it's been a fuzzy area for the CNCF with respect to specifications. I think we do have some projects which are the bulk of what they are is a specification. I think Spire and CNI and Tough are good examples of that. But we try and distinguish between a specification and a standard. Right, a standard is like, proof of, stamp of approval type of thing. So we don't see ourselves as a standard body. With respect to other content, I think there's things like white papers and best practices, and those things oftentimes are one of the things that we I think are looking to actually be output of the SIG process, where they can actually produce some of these artifacts. Yeah. The thing you're talking about with the questionnaire, it feels like it's a little bit in the middle here, because there is more structure to it than just a once and done type of white paper, but it's not quite sort of a technical specification. So I think that'd be something that we'd have to sort of talk about amongst the TOC to see how we might want to approach that.
Yeah, I am fully supportive of the idea that the CNCF should encourage non-code projects. I think I'm kind of echoing what Joe said to say I'm not 100% sure how much that falls into what we do. Maybe it falls into what the end user group discuss. So exactly how it fits in organizationally is a question mark for me. But I love the fact that there is work like that happening in the community.
I think at least something like a resources guide or something that goes in with like the trail map. Stuff like that. There's probably a pretty good example of that, and so I'd love to see us bring that in. I'll take a mental note to actually look that up and see what we could do with that. So.
Yeah, I think it could be an interesting idea to present to the end user community potentially and get their feedback, because whatever you've produced, you want to make sure there's multiple input and stakeholders, so you just don't have that one organization type perspective. And then we're always happy to publish white papers and other things.
Yeah, we could apply this approach to many such things. I think that'd be fantastic.
Cool.
To actually have a collaboration on it?
Yep. Okay.
80 end user members.
Yeah. So Jay said he's interested in having collaboration on it. So
Any other questions?
Happy to support it.
Alex.
Got it. Yeah.
So,
A little.
One-
Mic closer.
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the things I'm interested in, I know we say that the CNCF isn't about defining standards,
Yeah.
but we do some work on standards like the Kubernetes distribution certifications and that sort of thing. Do you think we should work on any other conformance type tests, maybe for CNI or CSI or things like that, to kind of give end users confidence that there is like a standard set of tests that you can have for a particular set of plugins or drivers or whatever?
So the question there was, CNCF is, not necessarily, like a standards body or, certification type body, but we do have efforts within CNCF that have produced things like the Kubernetes certification and conformance program. Before I hand it off to TOC, generally, our philosophy has been projects kind of have to request to do this, and there has to be a need for it. Kubernetes is really kind of the first project that went through this because they obviously had a need. There's rumblings now within the Envoy project that they're very interested in potentially doing some conformance or speccing out the XDS APIs. So they have this new little working group that they put together to kind of discuss that. But generally, approaches projects have to come with their needs, and we're happy to help them. But I don't know, if the TOC feels like we should have conformance programs everywhere. But I don't know.
I would double down or echo that. That's feedback from the end user summit that we had on Monday, was that they'd found, certain end users had found bugs in projects or scaling problems, and they were saying like, well, what does it mean when you call something graduated, or what does it mean when the TOC calls something incubated? Does that offer some kind of a stamp of approval of quality? And it actually doesn't right now. It makes sure projects have the mechanisms in place to do that, right? But it doesn't necessarily have like that stamp of approval. And
so I think, when we look at sort of the definition of a standard, it's this recommendation that this is the one true way to do X. And that's not something that the CNCF does, right? So I think there is an interest of saying like, hey, if you're going to call yourself Kubernetes, you got to meet this bar. But that doesn't mean that like Kubernetes is the standard orchestrator. And I think just as a subtle point here, like if say HashiCorp was interested in moving Nomad into the CNCF, that's something that we talk about seriously, and there would be no reason, at least on the sort of conflict area, to say no to that.
Yeah, Alexis.
I personally would like to see in the future, coming out of the end users particularly, some sort of business seal of approval, or for example, a project could be rated more highly if there are more independent commercial companies that can offer commercial support for it. And this gets us to the question about, projects that just have one vendor behind them, which has been a recent topic. I personally believe I want those projects to succeed, and I want those vendors to succeed. But over time, I think really big organizations also want to know that if the bus runs over the team, they can go somewhere else, for example. So I think this is an area we could look at, like a kite mark in the industry.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks.
Another question. Yes.
Yeah.
My understanding is now the CNCF is more like project oriented. I mean, projects that are already created by community, so are solving some.
Can you speak louder in the mic? Yeah, sorry.
Okay. Let's start again. CNCF so far is like more working on projects. I mean, adopting projects that have been created by the community. And so far, I only know this one security seek. I mean, it's like a cross project concern. So it's like two different models: so projects that come from the community and cross project issues. But now, is there any plan to probably create special interest groups for specific industries or problem where there are no already projects there? I mean, it's like kind of bringing the community to work together in something that you identify, like, no, we need a better way to address, they're working on certain vertical or whatever, and try to create the project out of the foundation.
Just repeat the question.
Okay, go ahead. You got it.
there was an observation that the CNCF has open source projects and it has special interest groups.
Yep.
And the open source projects are sort of verticalized and special interest groups can be cross-cutting. And then the question was, is there any desire to create, say, a working groups where there isn't a project yet? So there's a group of people who share a common interest, who want to get together, discuss a thing, and who knows what might come out of that. So
I think a big part of what the TOC should do, and with the support of the SIGs, excuse me, is identify these kind of gaps that we have. I don't think we're ever going to be in the case of sort of going, somebody should form a project to do this. I think it's more likely to be more of a, the word shopping is popping into my head. I'm not quite sure that's right, but you know, the idea of looking for existing projects that would fill that gap. And I think particularly with the SIGs, who will know that area and who will know what the challenges are and what the gaps are in their specific area, that could help us solicit new projects to fill particular holes. But generally speaking, we don't have a problem with, like, there are plenty of projects. we have a lot of projects to kind of look at and assess. There's quite a big queue.
So if I'm not mistaken, this has happened in the past already. There was a serverless working group, and out of that came what the cloud events, which is now a sandbox project. I think the extraction of the XDS APIs out of Envoy into a working group, it's like there's nothing there yet, but it's a bunch of people getting together to talk about it and see if it's there. So I think there are places where folks are, using, the CNCF as an excuse to get together and talk about stuff. But, you don't need the CNCF to do that, right? Get a bunch of interested people together, start talking, and that's how a lot of projects go ahead and get formed, right? I think, we look at something like the service mesh interface stuff that was announced on stage in Gabe's little 5-minute, 8-minute keynote, and sorry, inside joke there, and like I think that's just a bunch of people getting together saying, hey, here's something interesting, let's throw it at the wall. Whether that makes its way into the CNCF or not, I think we'll see over time.
Yeah. So I think there is a mechanism. It would be either through a working group or SIG that go collaborate if you want to try that route. Any other questions? Otherwise, I'll ask a question to the TOC. Here, grab this one.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, here.
So I'm Stian. I work on the KeyCloak project, and we're trying to submit to the CNCF. One thing I'm kind of lacking a little bit, and might be that I've just missed it or something, but is a little bit of the status once you propose to the CNCF and where it is and how long it's going to take before, can you enter into the sandbox or whatever?
So the question was, I have a project. It's, how long does it take essentially for it to get into the CNCF? And in this case, it's KeyCloak being explicitly called out. So I'm happy to answer this unless someone else wants to do it. But we've I think purposely kind of been informal on like specifying specific like deadlines for like it's you have a week to vote or you have to get in by a certain date. It's been purposely left to give essentially the TOC a lot of flexibility in how they go about their decision-making process, right? They may want to go back and do a due diligence on the project, or they don't think it's ready and will tell you to come back. But it's been particularly done in a very informal way, which I think could be frustrating on the other hand, but it does give them a lot of flexibility in how to operate at least. So.
With respect to KeyCloak specifically, I think oftentimes these are back and forth discussions, and it depends on the latency of both the TOC members and the folks representing the project. I've given Erin feedback. I haven't heard anything back from her. Yeah. So, as far as I'm concerned with respect to KeyCloak, the ball is in the project's court.
Yeah. Okay.
But I do have a email in my inbox that I need to reply on KeyCloak because I'm actually interested in sponsoring that project. So and that's kind of the mechanism overall.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Good. And I think some of this depends on what level you want to come in at. I think if KeyCloak wanted to come in at a sandbox level, it'd be done already. there's much more diligence, much more discussion at the incubation and graduation levels, and I think that definitely adds to the latency.
Yeah. So I mean, patience is all we could ask for, and apologize for things taking a while. So, here, no worries. We'll get you covered.
Yeah. So, I appreciate all that. Something like the dashboard, or I don't know, like something that just gives you like a summary of what's going on.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'll get in touch with Aaron and see what that's happening. Thanks.
Okay, cool. Feedback is good. Oh.
I think there's an awkwardness here because, like, I'll just be honest, like we can't say yes to every project, and nobody wants to hear no publicly. And this is not about Keycloak, okay? Just to be clear. But like it's one of these things where, like, oftentimes, like, we don't want to have a project go to a vote and then fail at the vote, right? Because that means that it's not a good look for anybody. And so I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of these things are a little bit more person to person, feeling things out, understanding how people are leaning. And it's I think it's understandable, but I also understand frustration with that process too.
Question?
Hi. So I'm co-chairing. I came out of the Safe Working Group, which started as a non-affiliated group, so it's totally possible, and now we're becoming the Special Interest Group on Security. So I definitely advocate people getting together and not waiting for the TOC's blessing before you start figuring something out. And so I totally get what you've been doing in terms of making the process smoother and figuring out how to scale. And I hearken back when trying to make my way across the CNCF to the CNCF mission, which is to make cloud native computing ubiquitous. And I'm curious whether you believe that the acceleration of projects is the primary thing that's going to make cloud native computing ubiquitous, or if that's just a hiccup right now that needs to be focused on to get through the backlog, and there's something else that you think is the thing that we collectively should be doing.
That is a lovely question. Who wants to?
I think I sort of unpack that into two parts. So one is, do we have enough technology, and how much technology should there be to build this platform? I don't know the answer to that. I was asked a similar question earlier this week, and it's like, well, in 10 years, will we have 1,000 projects? That doesn't feel right to me, but I have no idea what the right number is. There clearly are still things that need to be filled, so there's still need for more projects, but I have no feel for like how many is the end goal. And I think it will constantly be evolving. I think we will see projects that reach the end of their real usefulness and get replaced by something better. That would be a healthy thing over the kind of long term. But I think the other thing that is going to be really critical to ubiquity, and the sort of second part of the answer, is around the I want to say the word documentation, but that's almost loaded. It's about educating the market, the users. I think we're only at the sort of very, very beginning of the wave of enterprise users, and how we educate them is going to be a huge challenge for the whole community dealing with that.
I'd say two things, and it's the size of the overall community, right? I think that's one thing that is just, we kind of overlook, like we kind of take this, size of community for granted, but it's a very the Linux Foundation and they're playing a process of not trying to curate it too much, right? I think that we can make a mistake there, and that could actually decrease the size of the community, versus kind of like directing it. And I think sometimes the more you direct it, the more you have a chance of reducing it. But I will totally double down on as an enterprise adopting it as an end user, it's a very difficult landscape to figure out, right? And and we had to acquire a company that had like these 14 amazing Kubernetes experts in order to navigate it. And not every company is going to be able to do that, right? And so I think that's where I'd like to at least see us spend a lot of time is more on the visibility, or documentation. Yeah, is a little bit loaded, but a guide of how you use this stuff.
But I think we're also limited by the model that the CNCF is a toolbox, not a platform, right? In that we can have projects that compete with each other, that are are taking different runs at the same problem, at solving the same problem, and that fundamentally hampers our ability to take strong opinions and give very concrete advice as an organization. And so there's this tension between actually providing sort of a cloud native thinking in general versus a specific path through cloud native.
Alexis.
I think all those things are true. Very much agree. I see this as being analogous to the rise of the web, HTML, HTTP in the early 90s. I think nothing that's come between now and then has been as big or as important in terms of open standards and open source. So I think that we'll see a sort of similar pattern, which is an initial acceleration of technology, documents, specifications, with the confusion that shortly follows after that, followed by a period of clarity as people throw things away they didn't need and double down on the things they do need. And then what you'll see is you will see acceleration, but it will be among the users, not among the projects at that point. If indeed we are able to have a toolbox that can support an industry-wide re-platforming, if you want to call it that, then I hope not only that you'll see acceleration exponentially as you did with the web growth at the time, but also things built on top of that, new businesses, new use cases, both in places which make money and also in places where government and social impact as well.
Cool. Any other questions? If not, I'm going to ask them. How about this? If you were to accept one project into CNCF that you think is currently missing in that wonderful, huge landscape that we have up here, what would it be? Why? And why do you think, it kind of fits a missing piece?
I'm going to talk my book here. We've got a project called Flux, which we really like. And,
why would you want to see that?
Well, actually, here's another one. Here's a really interesting little project. We created something called Flagger, more as a demo actually, and it's kind of taken off as a way of doing. It's an operator for orchestrating a canary release in Kubernetes by talking to a service mesh and also to a router if you prefer that. And it's a small project. It doesn't need to have a huge number of people contributing to it, but it solves a useful problem. It corresponds to a project called Kayenta from Netflix, which is a more complex sort of Java-y thing. I'd really like to see a few of these kind of small projects that play a useful but limited role popping up in CNCF. We have a few really great big projects, Kubernetes being the most obvious. But some little projects would be good too.
Yeah, I know. I've seen, Jeff, you have something that solved a similar problem.
I'd like to see Argo, Argo CD and Flux combine into Argo Flux or something like that. Yeah. And we can accept that as an incubator project. It was interesting. I was having a conversation last night with Linkerd. And this is a really interesting one. So Istio is not currently in the CNCF, right? And Linkerd has now, over the past 6 months or a year, has really kind of you start to think of them more about as competing sort of projects when, probably a year ago we didn't think about them that way at all. And so some type of project that is more than Envoy from a services mesh standpoint, but maybe we have to do some kind of curation between Linkerd and Istio. But I'd like to see something like that in the CNCF.
Yeah, SMI.
SMI. Yeah.
I should have specified you can't choose a project from your own company, but next time. Okay.
Well, in that case,
Cube Hunter. I was like, Cube Hunter. No.
Yeah, no. I would say that I think there are still gaps around making it very, very easy to run your cloud native deployments securely, and things like identity management. We have some projects like Spiffy, but making it really easy to plug all these pieces together.
I mean, largely no comment because there's so many great projects out there. But I would love to see some solution that is like an OAuth proxy that actually is integrated with Kubernetes, because I think this is such a common problem that folks want to essentially put a corporate gateway in front of their stuff. And I think there was a project that was abandoned and then picked up, and I'm trying to remember who was abandoned, but like something like that I think is there's a gap right now.
Cool. All right. Any other questions from the audience? Okay, you gotta run? Yeah. One more? All right, final question, or you gotta run? I gotta run. Okay, no worries. We'll close it out then, and then we'll get people to go run. Okay, cool, thanks all. Good.